Hello and thank you for listening to this presentation. My name is Wendy and I'm delighted to share with you my forthcoming research that will look at how owner-managers of growth companies thrive at work. This presentation builds on the paper that was submitted to the conference as a development paper that hopefully you've had the chance to read. And today in this video, I will aim to address the questions which you may have asked me had we been face to face. This approach will hopefully generate deeper questions in the discussion board at the end of the presentation. First of all, who will care about this research? All stakeholders in the UK economy have a vested interest in ensuring our small businesses are sustainable and grow from strength to strength. The UK is currently number 1 for start-up companies, but only ranked 13th in the world for growth companies. The Scale-Up report in 2019 states that there were 36,000 scale-up companies in the UK, employing 3.4 million people and are generally 42% more productive than their peers. Given the potential of these companies, the government has called for an ecosystem to be developed to support these businesses. So this research focuses on owner-managers of these organisations to give insights to be shared with the academic community who have an interest in small businesses, both in terms of research but also as educationalists, and then with the wider community, including policymakers and other owner-managers. Why is this research important? The research is important as it will contribute to the existing literature in the field of positive psychology and small business. If policy in the UK is going to be successful in developing an effective ecosystem, it is necessary to have a deep understanding of owner-managers and talk to them using the taxonomy that they understand and use themselves. To grow, businesses have to be strong, nimble and sustainable. Sustainable not only for business processes but human sustainability as well. The owner-manager is in a pivotal position in a small business. Not only do they have to thrive themselves, but they have to have a thriving workforce to go on the journey with them. In 2010, Butterfield et al. Reported that owners are in a position that allows them to influence contextual features and behavioural resources by their management style. And later, in 2012, Schweitzer, Paraith and Gibson found that thriving leaders were rated 17% higher when compared to those who reported low levels of thriving, concluding that thriving is important to a leader's effectiveness, as subordinates regard them as role models of how work is done. For owner-managers, if they can thrive themselves in conjunction with growing their business, it can facilitate a thriving organisation, as their vitality can be contagious and have a positive effect on those around them. In 2005, Schweitzer and her colleagues presented a conceptual model of what thriving at work looked like. They defined thriving at work as a positive psychological state in which individuals experience both a sense of vitality and learning, gaining a sense of personal growth by feeling energized and alive. These feelings were fueled by agentic behaviours of task focus, exploration and heedful relating, and supported both by contextual features and individual resources. How do I know there is a need for such research? The answer is twofold. Firstly, following a review of the literature concerning thriving at work, it was evident that the focus of research to date has primarily been on employees in the US across a number of different industries. In addition, I have undertaken exploratory research with owner-managers to establish how they experience thriving at work and how that aligns to the existing conceptual model proposed by Schweitzer and her colleagues in 2005. This primary research followed the methodology used by Cope in 2011, when he looked at how owner-managers experience business failure using interpretive phenomenological analysis. I used this approach to gain an understanding of how owner-managers experience thriving at work. My primary research used an identification survey based on the Paraith measurement framework and used a sample drawn from owner-managers of growth companies who had been on an educational program in the northwest of England. The owner-managers self-selected to be part of the research, and the first 8 thrivers were then interviewed using a phenomenological approach, with the transcripts analysed in vivo. So how did the primary research influence this current research proposal that I have detailed in the development paper? The early research influenced the proposal in a number of ways. The methodology demonstrated that by using a qualitative approach there is an opportunity to uncover some deeper realities. Whilst idiographic in nature, the approach gave some insights that would not have been obtainable by using a more positive methodology. The main influence, however, was the findings. By discussing the experience of thriving at work with the owner-managers and then analysing the transcripts, it became apparent that in essence the owner-managers experienced thriving in a similar way that was predictable by the model. But the discussion highlighted some different and interesting nuances, which the owner-managers discussed using their own taxonomy. Thriving for the owner-managers was not a static emotion, but one which fluctuates over time, and their thriving was aided by high levels of learning and energy, as suggested by the model. But the owner-managers did not discuss vitality or learning, but described their thriving as having energy, undertaking not just learning a task, but a process of self-development as they crafted their role as their businesses grew. However, and perhaps the most importantly, they saw thriving as being linked to happiness on a daily basis. In their roles, the owner-managers said that they were very much multitask focused and relished working on their business in their own time. They saw no segregation between home and work. To them, they were both completely intertwined. Whilst it would perhaps be expected that owner-managers worked on their business in their own time, it was the extent and ready acceptance of this which was so surprising. They discussed never switching off from their business, with their business being their hobby, being happy to learn and develop to help their business grow, and being energised as their ideas turn into a reality. As expected, the owner-managers had autonomy in their role. They tried to develop a sense of community in their organisations, recognising the needs of different groups of employees. But all of the owner-managers became frustrated with negative individuals or those who did not see the need to learn and develop. While owner-managers demonstrated that they had behavioural resources that supported their own thriving, in particular psychological capital of hope, self-efficacy, resiliency and optimism. However, there was an interesting gender split with regard to the speed of change, as owner-managers developed their businesses and took advantage of opportunities, with the female owner-managers taking a more cautious approach than their male counterparts. These differences made me question whether the Spritzer model was in fact fit for purpose for owner-managers of growth businesses. This discussion and the development paper is aimed at sharing your thoughts for the trajectory of the next piece of research. With the aim of this next piece of research is to gain an understanding of how owner-managers thrive at work whilst running a growth company. The objectives include the development of a theory of thriving at work for owner-managers, identification of features of thriving for this set of individuals, and the processes that thriving owner-managers have put in place to support this psychological state, and to describe this state, understanding the taxonomy of thriving owner-managers. This aim and objectives should enrich existing literature in the fields of small business and also positive psychology, and inform educationalists and policymakers to talk to this set of owner-managers using their language, and to put processes in place to support the sustainability of these individuals, which in turn should aid the sustainability of their organisations. As one of the objectives is theory generation, a grounded theory approach will be taken. Owner-managers will be interviewed using a phenomenological approach to allow the owner-managers to articulate their experience of thriving at work for them. The transcripts will be transcribed and analysed using NVivo software to identify the pertinent themes and concepts that emerge from the data. As an educationalist, I have access to over 100 growth companies in the northwest of England who have attended an educational programme for growth companies run by Goldman Sachs. These owner-managers will be asked to complete a survey to identify if they are thriving. The identification survey will use the Thriving at Work measurement framework as developed by Paraith and her colleagues in 2012. Responders who are thriving and who self-select to be part of the research will be asked to engage in an interview process. Listeners to this video should note that these owner-managers have already completed an identification survey as part of the primary research on thriving at work. But it is felt that given the economic turmoil created by COVID, it will be necessary to re-identify those who are still thriving. As this is an appreciative inquiry, a strengths-based approach will be taken, in this case learning from those who are thriving the most. At this development stage of the research, it is not possible to give a sample size or timescale to the research, as theory generation is an iterative process, and interviews will continue to take place until no new knowledge is attained, to allow the theory to be grounded in the data collected. The interviews themselves will be unstructured to allow the owner-managers to freely express what thriving at work is like for them. To analyse the data, the interviews will be transcribed and input into NVivo, where a systematic approach to analysis will be taken. The data from each transcript will be coded. Subsequent interviews will take place until no new codes are generated. The codes will then be grouped so themes can be discovered from what has been said by the owner-managers. Some codes may be categorized in a number of themes, and this may allow interrelationships to be identified, although this cannot be known until the analysis has been carried out. This piece of research is unique in terms of the sample population, location, intended methodology, and timing, in that it is post-COVID. This research is an appreciative inquiry, and the sample will be those owner-managers who are deemed as thriving using the Paraith measurement. Future research, however, could cover comparative studies between owner-managers who are deemed to be thriving and those with lower scores, between different industry contexts, or between different genders. There is also the opportunity for longitudinal research as the economic environment changes or as the business grows. I hope this presentation has given you an insight on the research that's to be carried out and how the research proposal was arrived at. This research is still in the development stage, and as a new researcher it would be useful to know from more experienced researchers what are your overall thoughts. Are there any specific areas for me to address prior to embarking on the data collection, particularly in relation to the methodology and the purposeful sample? As this research cuts across both positive psychology and small business, it would be useful to know if there are any journals that my research may be of interest to. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for listening to this podcast and for reading the development paper, and in anticipation thank you for all the positive and constructive comments that you'll put in the discussion board. Thank you very much for your time.